"Excuse me, I found your wallet." The voice was quiet, strained from nights spent in the cold Chicago air. Sarah held out a thick leather billfold, its contents, over $50,000 in cash, completely intact. For the homeless woman, it was a fortune that could change everything. For the billionaire who lost it, this single act of honesty was about to detonate a chain of events he never saw coming. Her name was Sarah Miller, and for 3 months, a damp doorway on West Madison Street had been her home. The man was tech billionaire Alex Vance, for whom the missing cash was a mere inconvenience. But this collision between two people from opposite ends of the city would unravel a mystery that questioned the very nature of fortune and forgiveness. Why would a person with nothing return everything? And what happens when the person who has everything is forced to confront the very thing he's missing? Sarah's descent into homelessness began 18 months earlier, not with a single catastrophe, but with a slow, suffocating series of them. She was a certified nursing assistant, the kind of worker who formed deep bonds with her elderly patients. When her mother was diagnosed with a rare, aggressive cancer, Sarah did what families with thin margins do. She took a leave of absence to become a full-time caregiver. The medical bills, even with insurance, were a tidal wave. They swallowed her savings, then her car payment, and finally, the lease on their small apartment. Her mother passed away in a hospice room paid for by a charity, and Sarah was left with nothing but a duffel bag of clothes and $18,000 in medical debt. The shelter system was overwhelmed. She found a spot in a doorway, a slice of concrete guarded by a grocery cart containing her worldly possessions. Her reality was a relentless calculus of survival, finding a bathroom that wouldn't shoo her away, a soup kitchen that still had servings after 4 p.m., a safe place to close her eyes for a few hours. Yet, each morning, she would meticulously fold her blankets and tuck them away, a small ritual of dignity against the chaos. On the other side of the city, in a penthouse that overlooked the glittering skyline, Alex Vance was fighting a different kind of war. His company, Apex Data Solutions, was on the verge of sealing its largest-ever acquisition. The $50,000 in his wallet wasn't walking around money. It was a cash deposit for a clandestine meeting with a key whistleblower from the rival firm, a man who demanded absolute anonymity and old-fashioned, untraceable currency. The pressure was immense. Alex's board was growing restless. His chief financial officer was quietly questioning his aggressive strategy, and the media had begun speculating about Apex's stability. He had left the wallet on the roof of his car while fumbling with his phone, driving off into the dense Chicago traffic, utterly unaware of the catastrophe that had just fluttered to the pavement. Sarah found it later that evening, near a storm drain on Randolph Street. The thick, calfskin wallet was wet from a passing shower. When she pried it open under the dim glow of a streetlight, her breath caught. Stacks of $100 bills, neatly bound, more money than she had seen in her entire life. Her first, visceral instinct was not joy, but a deep, cellular fear. This much cash on the street meant trouble. It could belong to a criminal, a dealer. But nestled among the bills was a driver's license. Alex Vance. The photo showed a man with sharp, confident eyes. There was also a business card for a high-end corporate law firm and a faded, creased photograph of a young woman with a shy smile tucked behind the credit cards as if for private viewing. For Sarah, the decision was paradoxically simple. It wasn't about being a hero, it was about being able to look at her own reflection. Her mother had raised her with a stubborn Midwestern mantra, "What's yours is yours, and what isn't ain't." Keeping it felt like it would poison the last good thing she owned, her sense of self. The next morning, she used the last few dollars of her own money to take a bus to the address on the license, a sleek, guarded tower in the Loop. The security guard looked at her worn jacket, her layered scarves, and her determined expression with open skepticism. But she was persistent. "Please," she said, her voice steady, "just tell him Sarah Miller has something that belongs to him." Alex was in a crisis meeting when the front desk call patched through. Annoyed, he almost told them to send her away. But the words, "has something that belongs to you," triggered a cold dread. He rushed downstairs, and there in the marble lobby, surrounded by people in suits worth more than everything she owned, stood Sarah. She didn't say a word, she just held out the wallet. Alex took it, his fingers numb. He flipped it open. Every bill was there, the photograph was there. The shock was so complete it felt like silence. He looked from the wallet to her face, seeing the exhaustion, the cold in her cheeks, The profound lack of expectation, "Why?" was the only word he could muster. Sarah simply shrugged, a small, tired gesture. "It wasn't mine." She turned to leave. That's when Alex's paralysis broke. "Wait." He reached into the wallet, pulled out a thick stack of bills, at least $5,000, and held it out to her. "Please take this as a reward." Sarah looked at the money, then back at his face. A reward would mean a hotel room for a month, real food, new shoes, but in that moment, taking it felt like it would cheapen the choice she'd made. It would turn a moral act into a transaction. She shook her head. "I didn't do it for a reward. I did it because it was right." And with that, she walked out of the lobby and disappeared back into the flow of the city. Alex stood frozen, the rejected cash in his hand, a feeling of profound disorientation settling over him. In his world, every action had a price, every gesture was part of a negotiation. Her refusal was a language he didn't speak. He cancelled his meetings. He instructed his assistant to pull every public record on a Sarah Miller. The sketch that emerged was fragmented but devastating: medical debt, eviction, no current address. He learned about her mother, her former job. The contrast was unbearable. She had literally nothing, and she had just handed back a king's ransom out of pure principle. Meanwhile, he was surrounded by people with everything: partners, board members, his fiancée, all of whom seemed to be calculating how to get more from him. That night, staring out at the city lights, Alex made a decision. He couldn't let this stand. He had to find her. He had to understand, and he had to make it right. But what he didn't know was that his very public search for the honest, homeless woman was about to trigger a chain reaction. A corporate rival, watching his every move, saw a moment of weakness to exploit. And Sarah, just wanting to be left alone, was about to be thrust into a spotlight she never asked for. Alex Vance's search for Sarah Miller began with private investigators but quickly spilled into the public arena, creating a monster he could no longer control. Frustrated by the PI's lack of immediate results and driven by a gnawing, uncharacteristic guilt, he made an impulsive decision. He called a contact at the Chicago Tribune. The story he pitched was simple: a billionaire wanted to thank a good Samaritan. He omitted the whistleblower cash, the corporate pressure. The narrative was pure human interest. The article, titled "The Honest Soul: Billionaire Searches for Woman Who Returned Fortune," hit the front page of the Metro section. It included Sarah's name, her description, and the basic facts of her hardship. Alex thought he was doing a good thing. He was, in fact, lighting a fuse. For Sarah, the article was a disaster. Her anonymity was her last shred of security. Now, every passerby on West Madison Street was a potential journalist. Every glance felt like an intrusion. Fellow residents of the street were suddenly wary, some jealous, others suspicious that she had hidden wealth. The shelter where she sometimes managed to get a bed asked her not to return, citing the disruption her presence caused. Overnight, her already precarious existence became a public spectacle. She went deeper into hiding, moving her sleeping spot every night, feeling more alone than ever before. She saw the newspaper blowing against a fence, her own tired face staring back from the photo they dug up from her old nursing assistant ID badge. She felt exposed, hunted for a virtue she never considered extraordinary. Meanwhile, the public reaction was volcanic. The story was catnip for local news, then national cable networks. It presented an irresistible dichotomy: staggering wealth and profound poverty, connected by an act of old-fashioned morality. Talk shows debated it. Was Alex Vance a genuine philanthropist or a billionaire engaging in a publicity stunt to soften his corporate image? Was Sarah Miller a saint or simply a person who had done the bare minimum of human decency? Donations began pouring into a fund set up by the Tribune, small amounts from thousands of people touched by the story. It reached $100,000 in 48 hours, but Sarah, the intended beneficiary, was nowhere to be found to claim it. This very public vulnerability did not go unnoticed in the boardrooms Alex feared most. His primary rival, a cutthroat venture capitalist named Marcus Thorne, saw the emotional billionaire on the news and smelled blood in the water. Thorne had been trying to sabotage the Apex acquisition for months. He knew about the cash payment for the whistleblower. He had his own spies. He now saw a perfect weapon: a distracted, emotionally compromised CEO. Thorne's operatives began digging, not for Sarah, but for anything to amplify the distraction. They fed anonymous tips to gossip columnists about Alex's erratic behavior and his fixation on a homeless woman. The business press, already skeptical of the acquisition, began running pieces questioning Vance's focus and stability. The board's anxiety, once a whisper, became a deafening roar. Back in his penthouse, Alex was trapped in a cyclone of his own making. His phone blew up with calls from furious board members. His fiancée, Elena, a socialite accustomed to curated, flawless headlines, was livid. "You've made us a laughingstock, chasing some street woman across the news," she hissed before leaving for her mother's estate. The $50,000 whistleblower, spooked by the publicity, went radio silent, jeopardizing the entire acquisition. Alex had wanted to clear his conscience. Instead, he had destabilized his company, his relationship, and the life of the woman he was trying to help. The weight of his miscalculation was paralyzing. He stared at the growing donation total on the Tribune's website, a monument to good intentions gone horribly awry. He had to find her, not just to thank her, but to stop the chaos. It was a young intern at a homeless outreach nonprofit who finally broke the stalemate. She recognized Sarah from the newspaper from a visit the nonprofit had made to her stretch of Madison Street weeks prior. She didn't go to the press. She didn't go to the police. She directly emailed Alex Vance's foundation, which was now fielding all the donation inquiries. She included the likely intersection and a description of Sarah's distinctive olive jacket. This time, Alex moved personally and quietly. He drove his own car, a nondescript sedan he rarely used, to the location that night. He walked the blocks slowly, under the eerie glow of sodium vapor lights, feeling like an intruder in a world he'd only ever driven past. Found her sitting on a folded blanket in a recessed doorway, reading a paperback novel by the light of a convenience store sign. She looked up as his shadow fell across the page. There was no surprise in her eyes, only a deep, resigned weariness. "You," she said, her voice flat, no anger, just exhaustion. "You brought the circus to town." Alex knelt down, not caring about his tailored pants on the dirty concrete. The gesture mirrored his first instinct in the lobby, but now it was filled with shame. "Sarah, I am so sorry. That was never my intention. I needed to find you, to thank you properly." Sarah closed her book. "You thanked me?" I said. "No, that should have been the end of it." Alex shook his head, the words tumbling out. "It couldn't be. Don't you see? You had nothing. You gave back everything. I have everything, and the people around me are trying to take it all. You showed me a different currency. I have to make this right." He told her about the donation fund, now nearing $200,000. He told her he would clear her medical debt. He offered her an apartment, a job at his foundation, a fresh start. He laid out a plan with the efficiency of a corporate merger. Sarah listened silently, her face unreadable. When he finished, she looked at him for a long time. "You think this is about money?" she said finally. "You think my problem is a math problem you can solve? It's not. My problem is that I'm alone. My problem is that I lost my mother and my home and my place in the world. You can't write a check for that." Her words hung in the cold air. Alex was speechless. He had approached her plight as a series of financial obstacles. She was describing a wound of the soul. But before he could formulate a response, a new voice cut through the darkness. "Well, isn't this a touching scene?" A man stepped out of the shadows, holding a high-end digital recorder. It was a reporter, but not from the Tribune. This one worked for a sensationalist online tabloid funded by Marcus Thorne's media holdings. Thorne's plan was entering its next phase: catch the emotionally vulnerable billionaire in a compromised, bizarre situation. "Mr. Vance, care to comment on why you're having a private meeting in a doorway with the woman at the center of this story? Does your board know you're here?" Alex shot to his feet, his body moving between the reporter and Sarah. "This is a private conversation. Leave." The reporter smirked, holding up the recorder. "The public has a right to know. Is this a charity case, or is there something more personal going on?" The insinuation was vile, calculated. Sarah slowly stood up, gathering her blanket and her grocery cart. She looked from the reporter's hungry face to Alex's furious one. The last shreds of her privacy were being torn away, not by the elements, but by the world of wealth and power that had suddenly decided she was interesting. She didn't say a word. She simply turned and pushed her cart down the street, melting back into the city's darkness, leaving Alex alone to face the consequences of a spotlight that was now burning out of control. The reporter got his headline. And Alex Vance was left standing on the sidewalk, realizing that in trying to rescue Sarah, he had only driven her further away, while his enemies closed in from all sides. tabloid story exploded with the headline "Billionaire's Midnight Rendezvous with Homeless Woman," and the fallout was immediate and brutal on two fronts. In the corporate world, the Apex board called an emergency meeting. Marcus Thorne's planted narrative that Alex was emotionally unstable and fixated on a stranger to the detriment of the company had taken root. The whistleblower, seeing his face splashed across business blogs, permanently vanished, taking the crucial insider information with him. The acquisition deal, Alex's crowning strategic move, collapsed. The board issued a unanimous vote of no confidence, suspending Alex from his role as CEO pending a psychiatric evaluation, a humiliating stipulation straight from Thorne's playbook. In a single week, Alex Vance went from industry titan to a cautionary tale, locked out of his own company's headquarters. For Sarah, the consequences were more visceral. The salacious article painted her not as a moral figure, but as a potential manipulator, a street-smart schemer who might be playing a long game. The public sympathy curdled into suspicion. The $200,000 donation fund, once a symbol of hope, became a target. Online trolls accused her of hiding, waiting for the sum to grow. More dangerously, predatory individuals now knew a vulnerable woman was associated with a large, accessible sum of money. She was approached by a man claiming to be a financial advisor who offered to help her manage the fund for a hefty fee. Another, more threatening figure followed her for 2 blocks, muttering about how she didn't deserve it. The foundation of basic safety she'd carved out was gone. She was now a marked person, not for her honesty, but for the hypothetical fortune attached to her name. Alex, stripped of his corporate authority, but not his resources, finally understood the game. This wasn't just about him anymore. He had made Sarah a pawn in a corporate war, and she was now in the crossfire. His guilt transformed into a cold, focused rage. He called his most trusted attorney and his head of security. The mission was twofold: dismantle Marcus Thorne's smear campaign and extract Sarah from the danger zone he'd created. Using private investigators loyal to him personally, they began digging into Thorne's own dealings. They didn't have to look far. Thorne's hedge fund was leveraged to the brink, and the failed Apex acquisition had been his own Hail Mary. He was more vulnerable than he appeared. Simultaneously, Alex's security team, using discreet methods and contacts within social service networks, located Sarah again. She was staying in a different part of the city, in a temporary bed at a church-run overnight shelter that didn't ask questions. This time, Alex didn't go himself. He sent a woman named Dr. Anya Flores, a no-nonsense psychologist who ran his foundation's outreach programs. Anya found Sarah in the church basement, sitting on a cot, looking hollowed out. "Sarah, my name is Anya. Alex Vance sent me. He wants to help, but he knows he can't come here. He's created a situation that has put you in danger, and he wants to fix it." Sarah looked at her with dead eyes. "Fix it? How? By throwing more money at it? By getting me on TV again?" Anya shook her head. "No, by giving you control. The donation fund is yours, $230,000. He wants to transfer it to a private account only you can access, no strings, no publicity. He also wants to offer you a safe place to stay at a property he owns that no one knows about, while we help you navigate what comes next. Your medical debt has already been cleared." Sarah laughed, a brittle, painful sound. "So I go from being homeless to being a hidden prisoner in some rich person's guest house? What's the catch?" "The catch," Anya said gently, "is that you get to decide what happens next, but you can't decide if you're looking over your shoulder every second. This is a ceasefire, a chance to breathe." For the first time, Sarah's defiance wavered. The exhaustion was winning. The promise of a locked door, a quiet room, a moment without fear, was a siren's call. Reluctantly, warily, she agreed. Meanwhile, Alex's counterattack on Thorne was underway. His lawyers filed a defamation lawsuit, but that was the public face. The private move was more surgical. Alex's investigators had discovered Thorne had used illegal wiretapping to intercept Alex's communications about the whistleblower. They presented the evidence, not to the courts, but directly to Thorne. The message was clear: stand down or go to prison. The next day, the business press reported that Marcus Thorne was stepping back from his fund for personal reasons. The attacks on Alex in the media ceased overnight. But just as Alex felt one crisis resolving, the other deepened. Sarah had been at the safe house, a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood, for 3 days when she received a voicemail. It was from a collections agency, but the message was odd. It referenced an old, paid-off student loan, but the caller knew details about her mother's illness that were never made public. The voice was calm, polite, and terrifying. "We're so glad to hear you've come into some funds, Sarah. It's important to settle all your obligations. We'll be in touch." It was a shakedown. Someone had connected her to the money and was using her past to threaten her. Alex's security team traced the number to a disposable phone. The safe house had been compromised. Alex was at the apartment within the hour. He found Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, the donated smartphone he'd provided her lying next to the voicemail message played on speaker. She wasn't crying. She was shaking with a quiet, furious terror. "You see," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "you can't fix this. You just moved the target to a new wall. They'll always find me. As long as that money is attached to my name, I'm not a person, I'm a wallet." In that moment, Alex had a revelation. She was right. He had been trying to solve her problem with the tools of his world: money, security, legal maneuvers, but her problem was one of identity. She had been stripped of her story and turned into a symbol, a saint, a schemer, a victim, a lottery winner. To get her life back, she needed to reclaim her narrative. And he needed to do the one thing he'd been avoiding: completely remove himself from the equation. He made a decision. "Then we make the money disappear," he said. Sarah looked up confused. Alex explained. They would use the entire donation fund, every penny, to establish a charitable trust in her mother's name, funding hospice care for low-income families. The press would be invited to the announcement. Sarah would appear not as a homeless woman, but as the founder of the trust, honoring her mother's memory. She would tell her own story on her own terms, and then she would walk away. The money would be gone, legally and publicly, into a cause no one could criticize. The predators would have nothing to chase. Sarah stared at him, the first flicker of real hope in her eyes. "And then what?" Alex took a deep breath. "And then, if you want, the foundation will help you find an apartment and a job with complete anonymity. No one will know where you are, or you take the bus ticket I'll give you and go anywhere you want with a fresh start. It's your choice, truly." For the first time, Alex was offering a solution that addressed her need for agency, not just safety. Sarah agreed. The press conference was scheduled for the following Monday. Alex's PR team prepared a statement focusing on Sarah's wish to honor her mother and help others facing similar hardship. It was a masterstroke, turning a sensational story into one of legacy and charity. The night before the press conference, Alex was in his penthouse, finally feeling a sliver of peace when his personal phone rang. It was his attorney, and his voice was grim. "Alex, we have a problem, a big one. I just got a call from a producer at a national morning show. They've been contacted by someone claiming to be Sarah's long-lost half-brother. He's saying the donation fund rightfully belongs to him as next of kin, and that Sarah is mentally incompetent and being manipulated by you. He's going on air live tomorrow during your press conference." The claim of a long-lost half-brother was a lie, but the man behind it was frighteningly real. His name was Derek, and he was a career grifter with a record of fraud and extortion. He'd seen the news, connected Sarah's story to the donation fund, and saw a final, desperate score. His plan was crude but effective: go on national TV with a sob story, cast doubt on Sarah's mental state, and pressure her into a quick, quiet settlement to avoid a messy legal fight. He was betting on shame and fatigue to do his work for him. He had not bet on Alex Vance, having nothing left to lose. Alex received the news from his attorney at 11 p.m. The press conference was at 9 a.m. He had 10 hours. Instead of panicking, he felt a cold clarity. He called his security chief and his lawyer to the penthouse. "We find him tonight." Using the producer's callback number, Alex's team traced Derek to a budget motel on the city's outskirts. By 3 a.m., they had a dossier: his real name, his criminal history, and crucially, an active warrant for his arrest for violating parole. At 4:30 a.m., two private investigators, alongside a police detective who was a personal contact, arrived at the motel. Derek was arrested on the spot. The detective made it clear that any attempt to contact Sarah Miller or speak to the media would add witness intimidation to his charges. The threat was neutralized before the sun rose. At 8:45 a.m., Sarah stood backstage at the hotel conference room where the press conference would be held. She wore simple, new clothes bought by Dr. Anya. She held a single note card with her mother's name on it. Alex stood beside her. He had been reinstated as CEO that morning after Thorne's retreat, but the victory felt hollow. His focus was entirely on her. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "We can still cancel. The trust is set up. We can just issue a statement." Sarah shook her head, smoothing the front of her blouse. "No, he was right about one thing. I need to tell my own story, or I'll never be free of it." She took a deep, shuddering breath and walked out onto the stage. The room fell silent. Cameras clicked. For a moment, Sarah just stood at the podium looking at the crowd. Then she began to speak. Her voice was soft but clear. She didn't talk about Alex Vance. She talked about her mother, Linda. She talked about the long, quiet hours in the hospital, the kindness of nurses, the feeling of helplessness. She talked about the debt that outlived the person and the slow, crushing slide into invisibility. She talked about finding the wallet, not as a grand moral choice, but as a simple act of returning something that wasn't hers. "Keeping it would have made me someone my mother wouldn't recognize," she said, "and she was all I had left." Then she announced the Linda Miller Memorial Trust, explaining that every dollar from the public's donations would fund end-of-life care for families who couldn't afford it. She thanked people for their generosity, but stated that this was the only right outcome for the money. She took 3 questions, answered them with a direct, quiet dignity, and then left the stage. The applause that followed was not thunderous, but it was deep and respectful. The narrative had officially shifted from sensational gossip to a story of legacy. In the following weeks, the public attention faded, as it always does. The trust was launched with full transparency. Alex, back at the helm of Apex, quietly donated a matching $230,000 to its endowment, but his personal life was in ruins. Elena formally ended their engagement, citing the ongoing spectacle. His social circle felt foreign to him, their conversations about deals and vacations now seeming trivial. He'd had a glimpse of a different world, one where currency wasn't just financial, and he couldn't unsee it. Sarah accepted the foundation's help, but on her own strict terms. They secured her a small, modest apartment in a building with good security, not as a gift, but as a loan for the first and last month's rent. They connected her with a job at a community health clinic, using her nursing assistant experience. She disappeared from the public eye completely, rebuilding a life one quiet, ordinary day at a time. Alex respected her boundaries, only receiving occasional updates through Dr. Anya. He knew she was safe, employed, and healing. It had to be enough. 6 months passed. Alex sold his penthouse and moved to a smaller, less conspicuous home. He began quietly diverting more of his wealth and time into the foundation's outreach programs, focusing on homelessness prevention and medical debt relief. He found a grim satisfaction in the work that his corporate victories had never provided. One autumn afternoon, he was reviewing proposals in his new home office when his assistant buzzed him. "There's a Sarah Miller here to see you. She says she has an appointment, but I don't see it on your calendar." Alex's heart skipped a beat. "Send her up," he said, his voice tight. Sarah walked into his office. She looked different, still tired around the eyes but steadier. Her hair was cut. She held a small paper bag. "I came to settle my debt," she said, placing the bag on his desk. Puzzled, Alex opened it. Inside was every penny of the first and last month's rent he'd loaned her in cash. "It's all there," she said. "I got my first promotion at the clinic. I'm a patient coordinator now." Alex pushed the bag back toward her. "Sarah, you don't owe me this. It was a grant, a gift." She shook her head firmly, that same stubborn set to her jaw he remembered from the lobby. "No, it was a loan. I pay my debts. That's who I am, and that's why I'm here." She took a deep breath. "I also came to thank you, not for the money, for listening. That night on the street, you finally heard me, and you gave me the one thing I actually needed, a way to tell my story and walk away. So thank you." Alex was silent, overwhelmed. Then Sarah did something unexpected. She smiled, a small, genuine smile. "And I'm inviting you to dinner at my apartment next Friday. Nothing fancy. I make a decent meatloaf." It wasn't an offer of friendship, not exactly. It was an offer of humanity on neutral ground. A chance to relate not as billionaire and beneficiary, but as two people who had, for a brief, chaotic time, been tangled in each other's lives. Alex accepted. That Friday, he showed up at her apartment with a simple bouquet of flowers, feeling more nervous than he had before any board meeting. The dinner was awkward at first, then slowly eased into a real conversation. They talked about her work at the clinic. They talked about his foundation's new initiatives. They did not talk about the wallet, or the headlines, or Marcus Thorne. They talked about a new Korean barbecue place that had opened near her clinic and the terrible traffic on the expressway. It was profoundly ordinary, and for both of them, it was a kind of healing. As Alex drove home that night, he realized the final, surprising truth of the entire ordeal. He had set out to repay an act of honesty with money, but the real repayment, the life-changing transaction, had flowed in the opposite direction. Sarah, by refusing his reward, by forcing him to see beyond his checkbook, had given him a gift far more valuable, his own humanity back. She had shown him that the most powerful currency isn't wealth, but integrity, and that sometimes redemption isn't about grand gestures, but about showing up for a simple dinner and listening. The story of the wallet had reached its end. But for Alex Vance and Sarah Miller, two people from opposite ends of the city, a new, quieter story was just beginning, built not on a foundation of cash, but on a mutual, hard-won respect. The story of the wallet, in the end, was never about the money inside it. It was about the two worlds that money represented and the unexpected bridge that a simple choice built between them. We often believe that honesty is a luxury, a principle that can be set aside when survival is on the line. Sarah Miller's story and the countless real-world cases like it prove the opposite. Honesty is not a luxury, it is the core of our identity, the last possession we cling to when everything else is gone. It is what allows us to look at our own reflection in the morning. For Alex Vance, the fortune he spent years building was revealed to be a fragile fortress. It could not protect him from betrayal, nor could it purchase peace. What finally offered him redemption was not a corporate victory, but an encounter with a kind of moral clarity so stark it shattered his worldview. He went searching for a woman to repay and found instead a mirror held up to his own soul. The repayment he offered was financial, but the debt that was settled was spiritual. These stories resonate because they touch a deep, universal hope. The hope that our choices matter. The hope that integrity is its own power, capable of disrupting the cynical calculations of the world. The hope that no one is beyond reach and that grace can find us in the most unlikely places, a city sidewalk, a hospital corridor, a modest apartment over a simple dinner. We live in a world that constantly measures worth in transactions, in net worth, in social capital. The story of the honest homeless woman and the billionaire is a reminder of a different metric. It asks us what we would hold on to if we lost everything except our character. And it challenges us to consider what we might be ignoring in our relentless pursuit of more. The quiet miracles of human connection, the transformative power of seeing someone not as a problem to be solved, but as a person to be understood. Sarah and Alex's journey shows us that sometimes the most life-changing gift is not a check, but a chance to be heard, a chance to make amends, a chance to start again, not as the people we were, but as the people we choose to become. If this story reminded you of the power of a single good choice, share it with someone who might need to hear it today. And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to join us for more documentaries that explore the extraordinary moments in ordinary lives. Until next time.